We're talking about themes and variations today. That's it. Hey, I'm Schanno Johnson. If you don't know me, I'm a musician, composer, producer, and I make videos about all that fun stuff. Music production, music composition. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to see videos like this in the future. There's one type of form of music called theme and variations, or a theme and variations. And it's really common in classical music. I don't often see it in other types of music than classical music, but it's kind of used, the idea of it is kind of used in lots of different types of music. And I personally think that it can be super useful in helping you generate new ideas and get used to generating new ideas from old ideas, and just get in the practice of making music, using that music to get inspired to make other music, and just changing stuff in small little ways to then make whatever end song or end product you have better. So let's get into it. All right, let's quickly start off by talking about form. Form is basically how different sections of music are arranged and how those different sections are related to each other. So you can obviously have lots of different forms in music, because you can have forms where you have 3 different sections that are all completely unique and unrelated. You could have a piece of music that each section of music is related to the previous sections. You could have a piece of music that has 2 sections that are alternating and also unrelated. All of these different forms, or most of them, have some type of name, or you could use some type of convention like letters or numbers to then give them names and plan out or show, like describe, the forms that are used in a specific type of music. Specifically, we're talking about theme and variations. We'll get into that in the next one. All right, so a theme and variations, to put it simply, is basically just you have one main melody, one theme, and then you just change it a whole bunch, and those are your variations. So often, yeah, I know, it's great, right? Like that, duh. Theme and variations it's in the name. But the main idea is you start with a theme, you play that for however long it is, and then after that, you have your variations. So you can have as many variations as you want, but often you have a couple, and then you have the theme at the end. So there's a well-known piece of music called Variations on a Theme by Haydn. It's an orchestra suite kind of by Johannes Brahms. There's also a Mozart Variations on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star that you could check out. It's super common in classical music, but it's also kind of used in other types of music. For example, the idea of a verse in pop music is a variation on the original verse, right? That's kind of like using the idea of theme and variations in pop music. It's not the exact same thing, and it's not the main focus of the form, but again, it's the same idea where you have one theme, right, and you vary it by changing the lyrics that are used. And that's often how verses are in pop music, but that's a whole other thing we can talk about in another one. We're talking about theme and variations. So you start with your theme, then you vary it, you change it in some way so that's not the exact same thing, and then you vary it again. And then you think of another variation, and another variation, and another variation, and so on. And that's how you get your theme and variations, right? Where you're basing these variations off of the original one. You're trying to change it in some way to make it into a new piece of music, make it into a slightly new idea, slightly different idea, but using these old pieces. So let's get into some of what these variations can be. Now, I have a video called Gather Your Materials that's basically about how you can think of all of the variations, or a whole bunch at least, of a theme or pieces of music that you're gonna use throughout a piece of music. So go check that out. I'll link that in the description and in the card. But what can we do to vary this theme? Well, we can do a couple things. We can flip it upside down. We can play it backwards, we can play it backwards and upside down. Those are called retrograde, which is backwards, inversion, upside down, and retrograde inversion would be upside down and backwards. Retrograde, you just literally flip it around and play it backwards. Inversion, though, you take the intervals and flip every single interval. So let's say the melody goes up by a major second. In the inversion, the melody would go down by a major second, the exact same interval. You could also extend it. You can augment it, is what some people call that, augmentation, or diminution. You make it shorter, you make it faster, basically, right? Rhythmically, the beat stays the same, but all of the rhythms within that beat are shortened, right? So all of the quarter notes become eighth notes, all the eighth notes become 16th notes, and so on. You could also change the mode or change the key in some way, right? If it's in major, one variation could be in minor or Dorian or Phrygian or Lydian or Mixolydian or whatever mode you want. It could also be in a different scale like octatonic or symmetrical diminished is what some people call that. You could change the scale that you're using, or you could change the different groups of notes that you're involving. And then often at the end of your theme and variations, you often have the theme. So you have theme, variation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, however many variations you have, and then theme again at the end as it is played in the original at the beginning. And it kind of gives it this rounded feel, this more cohesive feel where you get really far away from the theme and then come back to the original theme. And then that kind of helps you be able to see how all of these different things are related. Let's get into why I think this is useful for writing music and for music composition. The main reason I think this is useful is getting used to being able to write themes and variations, and getting used to varying stuff can just open up the possibilities that you have when you're writing a piece of music, because you might often think of a 4-bar idea, but that's all you have. In order to expand that 4-bar idea into a song, you don't need to write 32 or however many, 120 measures of unique music after that. All of the measures after that don't need to be unique. They don't even need to be unrelated. You could use that one idea to think of your other ideas. So let's say you really like the sound of this melody. What if you flip it upside down? You might also really like that. That could be your chorus and your verse melodies, right? Or a variation of those could be your chorus and your verse. And right away, you have this other musical material that you can use that you didn't really need to come up with. You didn't need to think of a completely new idea to find this other material. And that's why I think it can be useful, because it gets you thinking about music sort of in iterations, kind of, as what is this one idea? How can I change that to make a different idea? Well, what if I change that again and change it again and change it again and continue changing it until I have this idea that's completely unrelated, but I got to it from this original idea. So in some ways it's related, or the process of getting there was related. It can just get you to generate tons and tons and tons of new music and new ideas that maybe weren't there before because you thought you needed to think of a whole bunch of new ideas that are unrelated to this original one. It can give you sort of that one idea as a starting point, as a springboard kind of, to think of other ideas, right? And you can use that in your music in lots of different ways. That's why I think it can be really useful. So another way that I think this can be really useful is it can get you thinking about music as larger forms a little more easily than if you just thought about distinct, unique sections of music. So I have another video called Plan Out Your Music. Go check it out. It's about figuring out what different sections you want in longer pieces of music that are, maybe 15 minutes or 10 minutes long, where you have to write a lot of music and you're not quite entirely sure how to actually structure that so that it sounds like 10 minutes of music that's supposed to be put together, right? Making a cohesive piece that sounds related and sounds like one piece of music in itself, rather than maybe it sounding like 5 different pieces of music that are just shoved together. In writing something like an album, it can often be hard to think of just that many ideas to make an hour of music, because an hour of music is a lot of music. So even if that's songs, thinking of all of those ideas for songs, it can take a long time to think of all of those ideas if you're not used to sort of thinking in iterations and changing stuff in small ways to make it better, or changing stuff in small ways to make it slightly different. So I think it can get you to being able to write longer forms of music pretty quickly, because then you get used to thinking, okay, well, I have 60 minutes of music that I need to write. I want it to sort of all be related to these 2 ideas. How can I make sure that it's still interesting for 60 minutes, but still sort of has some semblance of these 2 ideas throughout the piece of music? Now, I started doing this on an album that I'm working on that's going to be probably coming out next year. Honestly, it'll probably take a while for me to get it together. But that album, a lot of it's based off of 2 themes. And one way that I can think about these songs and make sure that they sound related to each other is through variations. So I can start with these two themes and I can think, well, what if I simplified them? I took out notes and made it into maybe a melody based off of just quarter notes. That's one variation. What if I made it more complicated? I added more ornaments to it, more ornamentation into these melodies. That's another variation. Now I got 3 melodies, right? Original and then 2 variations. What if I changed it so that I recreated a melody? I made a new melody out of this figure in the 4th bar. That's a 4th one. And you see how this can quickly become lots and lots of different type pieces of music because you have those 4. Okay, let's do some augmentation and diminution. We already got 6. Let's put it into all of the different modes. Okay, so it's in one mode already, so we have 6 others that we can put it in. Okay, now we have 12 variations already. Okay, what if we put it into the whole tone scale or the octatonic scale? That's 2 more. We got 14 variations. All right, what if we played it in 7/8, 15, 3/4, 16, right? And so on. And you could just get so many ideas generated from this that you could have 16 different ideas that, yeah, sure, they're all related, but they'll each be slightly more fresh than hearing the exact same idea over and over again. Now, you don't have to always do this in larger forms of music. You could use this idea for something like a 2 to 3 to 4 minute pop song, and it'll just get you some freshness kind of into your music so that maybe the second chorus doesn't sound exactly the same as the first chorus. You add something. Okay, another way that this can be really useful is it gets you generating different musical ideas in a way that's systematic so that you can kind of fall back on that and rely on that when you feel like you don't have any ideas. So I've made some other videos about generating different ideas and just thinking of lots of ideas. So I'll link those in a card and in the description, but this specific technique can get you generating tons and tons of ideas in a systematic way so that you don't really have to think about what you're doing, really. You can kind of just do it systematically following some different techniques, and that's what you can do, right? So that'll get you all of these ideas without having to really think about it, right? Because you can start with your idea. Let's say it's in 4/4 and it's major. Okay, let's do all the modes. Check how Dorian sounds, right? Check how Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian, check how all those sound. Those are a whole bunch of variations. What if you check how 7/8 feels, or 3/4? Check how 5/4 sounds, right? You're changing the meter. Do some augmentation and diminution. There's another 2 ideas that you can add to your list. See if you could play it in whole tone or octatonic. There's another few ideas that you can use. So you can see how this just generates tons and tons and tons of ideas. I used to, when I was in college writing longer forms of music, I would keep a sheet that I made. I literally typed out a sheet of every single way that I thought I could vary a piece of music. If I can find it, I'll put it in this video so that you can see it, because it is a lot. Like that thing was a page long, and it took multiple hours for me to actually go through it. And I'm not saying you need to do this all the time. Good God, it'll take so much time out of actually writing music to do this. But when you're writing music, if you don't have any ideas, fall back on that. Use that as sort of kind of like a crutch to generate some other stuff, to freshen up some ideas that you have. It can just get you shoveling out musical ideas so that you just don't stop writing, and you get into this practice of just constantly thinking of ideas and varying them and changing them. And maybe you throw some out because you don't like them, right? You're probably not gonna like a melody played in every single different mode. Some of them are gonna sound kind of weird. Like, that just happens, you know? But it just gets you writing lots of stuff so that then you don't ever have this lack of ideas, because as soon as you have one kernel of an idea, it explodes into lots of different ideas. And that's the main reason why I think this technique of writing a theme in variations can be useful. Even if you just write a theme in variations for solo piano or solo violin and you never play it for anybody, I think it can be useful because you're writing your theme, you're trying to think of a theme, and then you vary it a ton and you try and think of, how can I change this to make it a little more fresh, a little more interesting, and then still have a cohesive piece of music after with all of those materials. All right, so that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. I hope you learned something about music. If you did, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. As always, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.